The Han estate was not merely a home. It was a fortress of silk and secrets, where crystal chandeliers threw diamond light across faces that smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes. Where every handshake was a negotiation and every glass of wine was a test of loyalty. In a world like this, the invisible people were the most dangerous ones to ignore. They saw everything. And on the night of the Peace Gala, the night that was supposed to rewrite the rules of the Korean underworld, it was not a bodyguard in a fitted suit who caught the poison meant for Han Sung-min's only child. It was the woman no one had ever bothered to look at twice. The Maid. The ballroom of the Han estate had been transformed into something out of a fever dream, white orchids dripping from crystal columns, waitstaff moving like ghosts through rivers of silk and cologne, snow pressing softly against the tall French windows as if the outside world itself was leaning in to watch. Tasha Williams did not watch. She worked. Her hands, steady, practiced, invisible, moved through the preparations with the mechanical grace of someone who had learned long ago that the best way to survive in a room full of dangerous men was to become part of the furniture. She wore her uniform the way soldiers wore armor, crisp white apron over black, hair pulled back so tight it kept her focused, sensible shoes that made no sound on the marble floors. In the image of this night, if you could freeze a single frame, you would see her exactly as she appears in this moment, eyes half lowered but missing nothing, one hand pressed lightly to her chest as if already bracing for what is coming, her expression a mask of calm stretched over a mind that never, ever stops calculating. Tasha had been a chemistry student once. Before life rearranged her plans with the casualness of someone clearing a table. She knew compounds the way musicians know notes, by instinct, by memory, by the particular signature they left in the air. Which was why, when a waiter she did not recognize carried a crystal glass of fruit punch toward the corner table where little Mina Han sat alone in her white lace dress, her small face tear-streaked from another evening of being her father's showpiece rather than his child, Tasha's nostrils caught it before her eyes confirmed it. Digitalis. Faint. Masked beneath the sweetness of pomegranate and sparkling water. But there. She had studied that scent in a laboratory in a different life. She knew its dose curve. She knew exactly how much would kill a 30-pound child in minutes, and she knew exactly how much a grown woman could absorb and survive, if she was fast, if she was strong, if she did not hesitate. Tasha did not hesitate. She crossed the ballroom in 11 steps. She intercepted the glass with the quiet authority of a woman simply doing her job. "I'll take that to her, sir," and before the waiter's eyes could even register alarm, before Han Sung-min could look up from his negotiation table across the room, Tasha Williams raised the poisoned drink to her lips and drank. She felt Mina's small hand grab the hem of her apron. She felt the burn begin in her throat like a slow-moving fire. And she felt, across the length of that glittering ballroom, the exact moment Han Sung-min's eyes found hers, dark, unreadable, tattooed neck tensing above his fitted suit, just as her knees surrendered to the marble floor. The crystal glass shattered. The gala shattered with it. And in the chaos of screaming dignitaries and overturned tables and men reaching for weapons hidden beneath $1,000 jackets, one man moved differently from all the rest. Han Sung-min did not reach for a weapon. He ran to her. The most feared name in the Korean underworld dropped to his knees on the ballroom floor, gathered a maid in his arms, her white apron glowing violet-purple where the poison had splashed, her eyes rolling back, her lips still moving as if she was trying to tell him something, and carried her out of the room himself. He left the peace treaty unsigned. He left his dignitaries standing. He left his empire waiting. Because something had just happened to Han Sung-min that no enemy, no rival, no decade of violence had ever managed to accomplish. Someone had made him feel something. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you personally, just to know how far our story is traveling across the world. Next, Tasha wakes up, and she is not in the servants' quarters. Tasha had learned, in 18 months of service at the Han estate, that the safest way to exist in a dangerous world was to make yourself smaller than the danger. She woke before the household. She polished silverware until her own reflection stared back at her, tired eyes, pulled back hair, a face that the universe had decided was better suited for witnessing things than being seen. She pressed Mina's school uniforms with the same care she would have given a child of her own blood, and she left folded origami cranes on the little girl's pillow every Tuesday because Mina had once mentioned, quietly, that Tuesdays felt the longest. Han Sung-min she observed from a careful distance, the way you observe weather. He moved through his own home like a cold front, dark overcoat, white shirt, jaw set in a permanent verdict. His staff did not make eye contact. His associates spoke to him in the practiced tones of people who understood that words, in his presence, were loaded weapons. Tasha had watched him silence a room simply by entering it, had watched grown men adjust their posture when he looked their direction. She did not fear him the way the others did. She had grown up in rooms where the danger was less elegant and far less predictable. Han Sung-min, at least, was consistent. What she had not expected, what she filed away in the quiet archive of things she would never say aloud, was the way he sometimes stood outside Mina's bedroom door for a long moment before knocking. As if he needed to prepare himself for the softness of his own child. That detail, more than anything, told Tasha everything about who he was beneath the empire. The Peace Gala arrived dressed in white orchids and borrowed civility. Tasha worked the edges of the ballroom the way she always worked rooms, efficiently, quietly, watching the particular choreography of powerful people performing trust they did not feel. She noted the waitstaff she recognized and the ones she did not. She noted the man with the new shoes who moved too deliberately, who carried his silver tray with the careful tension of someone transporting something that mattered more than it appeared. She noted the crystal glass of fruit punch he was steering toward Mina's corner table. She caught it on the air before she saw it, that faint, sweet dark signature beneath the pomegranate. Her body recognized it the way the body recognizes cold before the mind has named it. Digitalis. Enough for a child. Precisely enough, and not a milligram more. Tasha moved. She crossed the ballroom in the manner of a woman doing exactly her job, unhurried, unremarkable, invisible. She lifted the glass from the tray with a quiet "I'll carry that to her, thank you," and she felt the waiter go still in the particular way of a man whose plan has just collapsed. She looked across the room. Han Sung-min was watching her. She did not know why, perhaps some peripheral instinct that governed men who survived by reading rooms. His dark eyes found hers across 40 feet of chandelier light and silk and negotiation, and for one full second, the most feared man in the Korean underworld looked at the maid who held a crystal glass and understood, without comprehension, that something was wrong. Tasha held his gaze. And drank. The poison moved fast, which she had calculated. She had 3 minutes of clarity, maybe 4, before her nervous system would begin filing its protest. She used the first minute to lower herself to the floor with as much control as she could manage, because she refused to fall like a casualty. She used the second minute to feel Mina's small hands grip her apron and hear the child's voice break open with a sound that carved itself directly into Tasha's chest. She used the third minute to stop feeling anything at all. What she did not experience, what she only learned later, reconstructed from the accounts of 47 witnesses who would spend years trying to describe it, was the moment Han Sung-min crossed the ballroom. Not walked. Not ran in any conventional sense. Moved, the way weather moves when it has decided on a direction. He was at her side before the glass had finished shattering. He gathered her from the floor himself, his arms beneath her with a certainty that suggested he had never once in his life asked anyone to do something he could do himself, and he carried her out of that room with his daughter's hand pressed against his back and his face arranged in an expression no one in that ballroom had the vocabulary to name. He did not look at his treaty. He did not look at his guests. Tasha woke to silence and the particular quality of light that meant money, golden, filtered, falling across a ceiling she did not recognize. She was not in the servants' quarters. She lay in a bed that was approximately the size of her entire previous apartment, in a room that hummed with a careful, expensive quiet. Her throat ached. Her chest felt like someone had rearranged her ribs and returned them slightly out of order. But she was breathing, which was the primary thing. Han Sung-min was sitting in a chair by the window. Not standing. Sitting, his overcoat discarded, his elbows on his knees, his face bent toward the floor in the posture of a man who has been there long enough to stop performing. He looked up when she moved, and something crossed his expression so quickly she nearly missed it. Something unguarded. Something that had no place in the face of the Korean underworld's most feared architect. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You knew." It was not a question. Tasha's voice came out rougher than she intended. "I knew enough." Another silence. Outside the window, the estate's security lights caught the falling snow, turning it silver. Han Sung-min stood, straightened his shirt with the automatic precision of a man reassembling his armor, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame, the posture she had catalogued in those 18 quiet months of watching him, as if deciding whether to enter or exit something permanent. "The waiter," he said, without turning around, "will not trouble anyone further." He stepped into the corridor. Tasha heard him stop, heard his voice carry back through the door with the flat, absolute weight of a man issuing the last word on a subject that was now closed forever. "Tasha Williams is no longer staff," Han Sung-min said. "She is the mother of this house." The diamonds felt wrong. Not because they were heavy, though they were, cold and precise against her collarbone like a very elegant warning, but because Tasha Williams had spent 18 months learning to disappear, and a woman draped in Han Sung-min's jewels was not a woman anyone could overlook. She stood before the mirror in the East Wing dressing room while two attendants moved around her with the practiced efficiency she recognized from her own working life, and she felt the particular vertigo of a person who has stepped into a story that was not originally written for them. Then Mina appeared in the doorway. The little girl stood there in her Tuesday pajamas, origami crane clutched in one fist, and looked at Tasha in the mirror with an expression of such uncomplicated, devastating joy that something in Tasha's chest simply stopped arguing. "You look like a queen," Mina said. Tasha looked at the child, this small, lonely person who had spent years being her father's heir and nobody's daughter, and made the only decision that actually mattered. She stayed. The underworld, it turned out, had opinions. They arrived at the Han table dressed in expensive skepticism, the heads of 4 allied families arranged around a dinner that was equal parts negotiation and performance, their eyes moving between Han Sung-min and the woman beside him with the particular amusement of men who have decided something is beneath them before it has spoken. The Kwan patriarch said it first, which everyone had expected because the Kwan patriarch always said what everyone else was thinking and considered this a form of power. He looked at Tasha with a smile constructed entirely of condescension and said that Sung-min had always had unusual taste, but he had not realized it extended to his household arrangements. The table went quiet in the specific way of rooms waiting for blood. Tasha set down her fork. She looked at the Kwan patriarch with the steady, cataloging gaze she had spent 18 months perfecting, the look that saw everything and revealed nothing, and she suggested, pleasantly, that since the evening had grown slow, perhaps the gentleman would be interested in a hand of cards. 3 hours later, Tasha Williams rose from the poker table having systematically dismantled the financial confidence of every man in the room using nothing but patience, pattern recognition, and the particular advantage of being someone that powerful men had already decided not to take seriously. She had learned chemistry. She had learned silence. She had learned, in 18 months of moving invisibly through a world of dangerous men, exactly how they thought and where they were blind. Nobody laughed after that. It was the ledger that told her. She found it by accident. She was still a woman who noticed things others left unguarded, tucked inside a hollowed book in the library that adjoined the East Corridor. A record of payments, dates, a pharmaceutical supplier she recognized from her chemistry days, and a name she recognized from the family portraits that lined the main hallway. Han Ji-eun. Sung-min's sister. Tasha sat with the ledger in her lap for a long time, doing the arithmetic she did not want to do, following the timeline back to the night of the Peace Gala and arriving at a conclusion that felt like swallowing glass. She went to Sung-min that evening. She laid the evidence on his desk with the careful precision of a woman who understood that the next 30 seconds would determine everything, and she told him what she had found, what it meant, and who had ordered his daughter's death. She watched his face. She had learned to read that face over months of careful observation, had mapped its particular geography of restraint and calculation. She watched it do something she had not seen it do before. She watched it refuse. Not the evidence. He read it twice, slowly, and she could see him following the same arithmetic she had followed. He arrived at the same answer. But Han Jian was his blood, and Han Sung-min had built his entire existence on the premise that blood was the only thing in his world that could not be corrupted. He closed the ledger. "Leave this with me," he said, in the voice he used when a conversation was finished. Tasha left it with him. But she kept the photograph she had made of every page. The coup began on a Thursday, which felt insultingly ordinary. The first explosion took out the East Gate. The second took out the communications hub. By the time the third detonated somewhere near the staff garage, it was clear that whoever had planned this had spent considerable time learning the estate's layout, which meant they had inside help, which meant the ledger had been right, which meant Sung-min had not moved fast enough. Tasha was already moving. She shed the silk gown with the efficiency of someone who had never entirely trusted it. Underneath, the plain clothes she had quietly kept, and the work boots she had never thrown away because some instincts run too deep for diamonds to cover. She had spent 18 months memorizing this house. Every service corridor, every maintenance tunnel, every door that locked from which side and which windows faced which blind spots in the security rotation. She pulled Mina to the safe room herself, pressed the child's face against her shoulder so she would not see the corridor, and then she went back out. She found Sung-min in the main hall, back against a pillar, two of his men down, his jacket gone and his expression finally, completely stripped of every performance. He looked at her standing there in her work boots and her plain clothes in the middle of his burning empire, and something moved through his face that was not surprise, exactly, but was its near neighbor. "The east tunnels," Tasha said. Jian's men came through the kitchen access. "I can seal them in." He looked at her for 1 second. Then, "Show me." They moved through the house together, the king who ruled by force and the woman who ruled by knowledge, and Tasha led him through every corridor she had walked invisible for 18 months, sealing passages, redirecting the trap, using the architecture of her own former invisibility as a weapon. By the time Han Jian's men understood what had happened to their exit routes, it was already finished. When it was over, when the estate had gone quiet in the particular way of places where a storm has passed and taken everything flimsy with it, Han Sung-min stood in the main corridor and looked at the woman beside him for a long time without speaking. Then he took her hand, not with possession, not with performance, and walked her to the balcony. The city spread below them, blue dark and glittering, snow drifting soft and indifferent across the rooftops of a world that had no idea how close it had come to rearranging itself. Tasha stood at the railing and breathed the cold air and felt, for the first time in as long as she could locate in her memory, like someone who was standing exactly where she was supposed to be. Behind them, inside the warm light of the estate, Mina was asleep in her room with a fresh origami crane on her pillow. Around them, in offices and cars and meeting rooms across the city, the Han Syndicate's operations were continuing under a restructured chain of command that Tasha had spent the past 3 weeks quietly designing, because she had understood long before anyone else did that an organization is only as strong as the blind spots its leader refuses to examine. Han Sung-min had understood that too, now. He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him in the cold air, and he said, quietly, "I should have listened." Tasha looked at the city. "Yes," she said. "You should have." A pause. Then, with the ghost of something that was becoming, slowly, a real smile, "Don't let it happen again." She felt him exhale, that long, heavy release of a man setting down a weight he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was optional. He did not put his arm around her with the theatrical gravity of a man making a statement. He simply stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, equal in the cold. Tasha Williams had come to this house invisible. She had learned its secrets, memorized its corridors, protected its most precious inhabitant, survived its poison, and rebuilt its foundations from the inside out. She was nobody's maid anymore. She was the brain behind the most powerful name in the Korean underworld, the mother of its heir, and the only person its king had ever genuinely trusted. She was the queen. And she had earned every cold, glittering inch of it.